Ever feel like your Rust code is getting kind of unruly? Like maybe it's time to move on from that spaghetti code phase. Time for something a bit more elegant, something that won't be a total nightmare to maintain down the line.
It's a common growing pain, for sure.
Right. So that's where Rust modules come in, I guess? They're like, what, the secret ingredient for writing clean code?
Mm.
Code that can actually, like, grow with your project.
That's the idea.
Hmm.
And luckily for us, there's this awesome article by, get this, a creative tech innovator, Anohu Abior.
Okay, love the name.
Right. It's called Rust Modules Reimagined, Organizing Code. And they've got some really interesting takes on this whole module thing.
Let's hear him. What jumped out at you?
Well, right off the bat, the author makes this point that Rust modules, they're more than just folders. It's not just about, oh, I'll put this file here. It's about shifting your whole mindset to think about the architecture of your code from the get-go.
Okay, so it's not just about organizing files neatly. It's about, what, designing the whole structure more deliberately.
Exactly. Like, think about building a house. You wouldn't just start nailing random boards together, would you?
Chaos.
Total chaos. You'd start with a blueprint, a solid plan. You'd make sure everything fits together in a way that makes sense. It's got to be logical. It's got to be stable.
So modules are like the blueprints for our Rust code.
Exactly. They're the guiding plan that helps us build a code base that's actually robust and maintainable.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see where this is going. So it's less about where we save our files on our computer and more about planning out how all the different parts of our code will interact, how they'll access each other.
You're getting it. And the article uses this great example to illustrate this. They talk about building an inventory system for a grocery store, let's say.
Practical.
Right. So you wouldn't just lump all the code into one giant file. You'd have separate modules for, let's say, managing inventory, tracking sales, handling user accounts, the different functions.
Yeah, breaking it down makes sense. Like instead of this massive, overwhelming system, you've got smaller, more manageable chunks.
Right. And each module would have its own clear purpose, its own responsibilities within that larger system. This just makes your code so much easier to reason about,
Yeah.
easier to test, and way easier to maintain as that code base inevitably starts to grow.
Makes sense.
But it's bigger than just, oh, let's separate things out. It's also about controlled access.
Okay, hold on. Controlled access. Tell me more about that.
So one of the core principles of Rust modules is this concept of visibility.
Okay, I'm listening.
By default, everything in Rust is private.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which might seem a bit restrictive at first, but it's actually a really powerful feature because it forces you as a developer to think really critically about what parts of your code should actually be accessible from other parts of your code.
So it's like Rust is saying, hey, you can't just reach into any part of the code from anywhere else.
Exactly. You have to be intentional.
Which, now that I think about it, yeah, that would probably make things way less prone to those weird, unexpected errors.
100%.
Yeah.
Let's go back to that grocery store inventory example.
Okay, yeah.
You wouldn't want just anyone, let's say a random user on their phone app, to be able to directly change the price of like an avocado in their cart, right?
Right. Anarchy. No one wants that.
Exactly. That's where private fields come in. That's where controlled functions come in.
Oh, I see. So we might have a function like, let's say, update price. And only authorized employees, the staff at the store, they can access and use that function.
Exactly. So that function would be public, meaning other modules could access it, but the actual price field within, say, an item structure that would stay private, tucked away safely.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we're building in these safeguards, essentially, making sure that data is only modified in a controlled and predictable way.
Exactly. Think of it as building walls and doors in your code architecture. You decide who gets to go where and what they're allowed to touch.
And that's a good thing. Who knew being organized could be so powerful? And that kind of control, that's going to be even more important as our code base gets bigger and bigger, right?
Totally. Actually, that's a perfect segue. This is where Rust's module system really, really shines when it comes to organizing all those files, all those directories in a way that doesn't make you want to tear your hair out.
Okay, so we're going beyond just the blueprint idea and getting into the nitty-gritty, like how do modules actually exist within our project? How's it all organized on my computer?
Exactly. And the cool thing is the article does a great job of showing how Rust takes modules and just seamlessly integrates them with your project's actual file structure. Like, let's say our grocery store app, it's a hit. It's growing. We're adding more features, more code. So we might end up with separate folders for, say, inventory, sales, users, mirroring that module structure we talked about.
Oh, that makes sense. Keep the file system organized the same way you're organizing the code itself. Saves you headaches later on.
Exactly. It's all about keeping things clean, intuitive. But you might be wondering, how does Rust actually know that these folders on my computer, they represent these different modules?
I was just going to ask that.
Right. Well, here's where the magic happens, or at least one part of it. It's the mod keyword. You literally just declare, let's say, mod inventory in your main file. And Rust is smart. It knows to go look for a file or a whole subdirectory named inventory and load that module up.
So it's like giving Rust a treasure map. Hey, go here to find the good stuff.
Exactly. And the article even gets into this cool detail about absolute versus relative paths when you're referencing these modules. Gives you a lot of flexibility in how you organize your code.
Okay, so to be clear, absolute path would be like giving the full address to a module starting from the root of our project.
Yep. Like giving someone directions,
Yeah.
starting from like City Hall, no matter where you actually are.
Right, versus a relative path would be more like go 2 blocks that way, turn left at the park.
You got it. So like imagine in our grocery app, we've got this module for handling discounts, and it's inside our sales section. With an absolute path, we'd reference it like this, crate.sales.discounts, the whole shebang.
Right, but with a relative path, assuming we're already like inside that sales module, we could just say mod discounts. Way shorter, way cleaner.
Exactly. And easier to read, too, which is always a win in my book. But this whole thing with structuring things clearly, it really, really pays off when we start talking about abstraction.
Okay, abstraction. One of those words. I get it in theory, but sometimes I feel like I need an example I can really sink my teeth into.
I feel you. So picture this, our grocery store app. It's a massive success. Everyone's using it. And now we want to build a companion mobile app so customers can browse the virtual aisles, build their shopping lists, the whole deal. Right. But here's the thing. You wouldn't want to just give that mobile app direct access to all the inner workings of your inventory system, your sales logic, all that.
Yeah, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Oh, yeah. Talk about security risks. Chaos. So that's where abstraction swoops in to save the day. Modules, they let you build these clean, well-defined APIs.
APIs, right, like interfaces between different parts of the code.
Exactly. They separate the really complex stuff going on behind the scenes from the way other apps actually interact with your system.
So it's like we can give those mobile app developers a nice, simplified control panel without letting them mess around with the wiring and the plumbing behind the walls.
Right.
Like, we're giving them the tools they need to build a great app, but we're not overwhelming them with unnecessary complexity.
Right.
And we're definitely not handing over the keys to the kingdom.
Exactly. And here's the real beauty of using modules for this kind of thing. Even if we have to go back and change something like some deep internal logic in our inventory system.
Which, let's be real, happens all the time in
With
software development.
All the time. But even if we do, we can do it without breaking the mobile app. They don't even have to know we changed anything.
Oh, that is huge. No more frantic emails from the app team every time we tweak a variable.
Exactly. And it goes even further. The article talks about how modules can actually help us manage different versions of our API.
Okay, now that's next level stuff. Version control can be a beast.
Tell me about it. But think of it this way. Let's say we're adding a new feature to our grocery app. We want to track the origin of each product.
Oh, cool. Like if they're locally sourced, organic, all that.
Exactly. So we can use modules to create a brand new version of our inventory API, one that includes all this origin data. But here's the kicker. We can still keep that old version running for the mobile app, until they're ready to update their end and use the new info.
So it's like having, separate blueprints for different phases of our grocery store expansion. Everything keeps running smoothly, even as we're making big changes behind the scenes.
Perfect analogy. And, all this talk about modules, it actually brings us to this wider world of Rust. We got to talk about crates and workspaces.
Okay, yeah. I was just starting to wonder how all of this fits into the bigger picture.
Right. So imagine this. Our awesome modular grocery store app, we can actually package it up as a crate itself.
Okay, so if I'm following, a crate is like taking our well-organized grocery store code and turning it into a blueprint that other developers could use to build like their own digital grocery empires.
You got it. Crates are like those prefabricated building kits. They make it so much easier to share code, reuse code. And then you can group a bunch of related crates together in something called a workspace. That's like having your master blueprint for the whole shopping district. It makes it way easier to manage all the different dependencies, build larger projects.
So we could have a crate for a grocery app, another crate for the point of sale system, one for handling deliveries, and so on. And all of these, they can work together within this larger workspace.
Exactly. And this whole philosophy, this modular way of thinking, it's what makes Rust so powerful, so scalable. You're breaking down these huge, complex systems into smaller, manageable, reusable pieces.
It's amazing to see how it all connects, from those initial blueprints we were talking about with modules, all the way to this grand architecture of crates and workspaces. Rust has really thought this through.
Right. They're serious about robust, maintainable code.
No kidding. And our creative tech innovator from the article, they made this point that really stuck with me. They said Rust modules, they're not just about organization. It's deeper than that. It's a whole design philosophy. A design philosophy that values what? Clarity, maintainability, and scalability. Those are some pretty great values to have in code or in life.
Couldn't agree more. And honestly, the deeper you dive into Rust, the more you'll see this philosophy baked into everything, the way it handles errors, the way it deals with concurrency. It's all connected.
So it's not enough to just learn the syntax. You've got to internalize this new way of thinking about code, a better way.
It's like leveling up as a developer. And speaking of leveling up, I'm going to leave you with this little thought.
Hit me.
So we've been talking about Rust, but think about your current project, whatever you're working on. Maybe it's not even in Rust.
Right.
But how can you apply these principles, this focus on structure, on clarity, on controlled access? How can you bring a little bit of that Rust mindset into your work, no matter what language you're using?
Ooh, that is a great question. It's like a challenge, to take these ideas and really run with them.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, these are principles of good software design, period.
Yeah.
Timeless, universal, no matter your language of choice.
And on that note, I think we've done our deep dive into the world of Rust modules. Hopefully you, dear listener, have picked up some new insights along the way, maybe even a fresh perspective on how to approach organizing